the story that surprised the whole world. The girl got pregnant when she was too close to the dog. The small town of Havenwood, nestled in the Green Mountains of Vermont, was a place where time seemed to slow down, where neighbors knew each other's names, and where the changing seasons painted the landscape in vibrant hues. For 12-year-old Emily Carter, Havenwood was more than just a town, it was her entire world. And at the center of that world was Max, her loyal golden retriever. Max had been a part of Emily's life since she was a toddler. He was more than just a pet. He was her confidant, her protector, her shadow. They were inseparable, sharing a bond that went beyond words, a connection built on years of shared adventures, whispered secrets, and unconditional love. Emily was a bright, energetic girl, with a spirit as wild and free as the Vermont woods she loved to explore. She had her mother's kind eyes and her father's easy smile, a combination that made her instantly likable. She was a good student, a loyal friend, and a devoted daughter. But her greatest joy came from spending time with Max. They would spend hours exploring the woods behind their house, Max bounding ahead, his golden fur gleaming in the dappled sunlight, Emily following close behind, her laughter echoing through the trees. They would play fetch in the meadow, swim in the clear, cold stream, and curl up together on the porch swing, sharing secrets and dreams. Max was Emily's constant companion, her furry guardian angel. He seemed to sense her moods, offering a comforting presence when she was sad, a playful nudge when she was bored, and a protective growl when she was scared. He was her shadow, her confidant, and the keeper of her secrets. Their home, a cozy two-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch, was filled with the warmth of family life. Sarah, Emily's mother, was a librarian, a woman with a gentle nature and a love for books. John, Emily's father, was a carpenter, his hands calloused from years of working with wood, his heart soft and full of love for his family. They were a close-knit family, sharing meals together, playing board games on rainy nights, and taking weekend trips to explore the beauty of Vermont. They were a typical small-town American family, living a simple but fulfilling life. But as the summer days began to shorten, and the leaves began to turn from vibrant green to fiery red and gold, a subtle shift occurred in Emily's life. A change that would test the bonds of family, challenge the assumptions of a community, and reveal the extraordinary depths of a young girl's connection with her beloved dog. It was a change that no one could have predicted, a mystery that would unfold slowly, revealing a truth that was both shocking and strangely beautiful. The first signs were subtle, easily dismissed as the normal fluctuations of a growing girl. Emily, usually brimming with energy, began to experience bouts of fatigue. She would come home from school, her usual enthusiasm replaced by a weary slump, and collapse on the sofa, falling asleep almost instantly. "Just growing pains," Sarah, her mother, would say, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's forehead. "You're shooting up like a weed, honey. It's bound to make you tired." Emily would nod, accepting her mother's explanation, but a nagging feeling of unease lingered. It wasn't just tiredness, it was a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that she couldn't shake off, no matter how much she slept. Then came the nausea. At first, it was just a mild queasiness in the mornings, easily dismissed as a passing stomach bug. But it persisted, growing stronger with each passing day, until she could barely keep down her breakfast. "Maybe you're coming down with something," John, her father, suggested, his brow furrowed with concern. "We should take you to the doctor if it doesn't get better." Emily, however, resisted. She hated going to the doctor, hated the probing questions, the cold instruments, and the sterile smell of the clinic. She insisted she was fine, that it was just a temporary thing, that it would pass. But it didn't pass. The nausea worsened, accompanied by a strange swelling in her lower abdomen. It wasn't painful, but it was noticeable, a subtle rounding of her usually flat stomach. Emily tried to hide it, wearing loose-fitting clothes and avoiding mirrors. She was embarrassed, confused, and increasingly frightened. She didn't understand what was happening to her body, and she was afraid to tell her parents. She confided in Max, her loyal companion, whispering her fears into his soft fur, seeking comfort in his warm presence. Max seemed to sense her distress, responding with increased affection, licking her face, and resting his head on her lap. He also started to exhibit unusual behavior. He became fiercely protective of Emily, growling at anyone who approached her too quickly, even her own father. He would follow her everywhere, his eyes constantly watching her, as if guarding her from some unseen threat. At night, he would sleep at the foot of Emily's bed, his body pressed against hers, his ears perked, listening for any sign of danger. He seemed to sense that something was wrong, that his beloved Emily was in need of protection. The symptoms continued to escalate. Emily started to experience missed periods, a development that she couldn't ignore. She was terrified, her mind racing with impossible scenarios. She was only 12 years old. She couldn't be pregnant. It was unthinkable, absurd. But the evidence was mounting, her body betraying her, whispering a truth that she couldn't comprehend. She was trapped in a nightmare, a waking dream that defied logic and reason. She needed help, but she was too afraid to ask for it. The first symptoms were dismissed, but they were the harbingers of a mystery that would soon consume her life. The changes in Emily's body became undeniable. Her abdomen continued to swell, her breasts became tender, and her fatigue deepened. The whispers of doubt in her mind turned into a roaring chorus of fear. She could no longer ignore the terrifying possibility that was taking root in her body and her thoughts. Finally, one evening, after a particularly difficult day at school, Emily broke down. She confessed everything to her mother, her voice trembling, her eyes filled with tears. "Mom, I think something's wrong," she sobbed. "I'm scared." Sarah, her heart sinking with a premonition of something dreadful, held her daughter close, stroking her hair, trying to soothe her fears. "What is it, honey?" she asked gently. "Tell me what's wrong." Emily, her voice barely above a whisper, described her symptoms: the fatigue, the nausea, the missed periods, the swelling in her abdomen. Sarah's blood ran cold. The symptoms were unmistakable. They pointed to one terrifying conclusion: pregnancy. But it was impossible. Emily was only 12 years old. She was just a child. Sarah tried to remain calm, to reassure her daughter, but her mind was racing. She couldn't comprehend how this could have happened. She had trusted Emily, believed in her innocence. She immediately called John, who rushed home from work, his face etched with worry. They decided to take Emily to the emergency room, hoping for a rational explanation, praying for a miracle. The emergency room was a blur of activity, a cacophony of beeping monitors, hurried footsteps, and hushed conversations. Emily was examined, poked, and prodded. Blood tests were taken, ultrasounds were performed, and questions were asked, questions that Emily couldn't answer. The wait was agonizing. Sarah and John sat in the waiting room, their hands clasped tightly, their hearts pounding with fear and anticipation. They tried to remain optimistic, to hope for the best, but the dread was overwhelming. Finally, a doctor emerged, his face somber. He asked to speak to Sarah and John privately. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," he began, his voice grave, "I'm afraid I have some difficult news. The tests confirm that Emily is pregnant." The words hit Sarah and John like a physical blow. They stared at the doctor in stunned silence, their minds struggling to process the impossible. "Pregnant," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "But how? She's only 12. The doctor sighed, his expression filled with a mixture of sympathy and professional detachment. "We don't know how yet," he said. "It's extremely unusual, to say the least. We need to run more tests to determine the circumstances." The doctor's words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. He was suggesting the unthinkable, the possibility of abuse, of assault. Sarah and John were devastated. Their world had been turned upside down. Their daughter, their innocent child, was pregnant, and they had no idea how it had happened. The growing concerns had led to a shocking diagnosis, a medical impossibility that would challenge everything they believed and force them to confront a reality they could barely comprehend. The doctor visits had confirmed their worst fears, but the mystery was far from solved. The initial diagnosis of pregnancy sent shockwaves through the Carter family and the small town of Havenwood. The news, initially confined to the emergency room staff, quickly spread through whispers and hushed conversations, becoming the subject of intense speculation and judgment. Sarah and John, devastated and confused, struggled to comprehend the impossible. They knew Emily was a good girl, a responsible child. They couldn't imagine how she could have become pregnant. They racked their brains, searching for an explanation, but found none. They questioned Emily gently, cautiously, trying to understand what had happened, who was responsible. But Emily remained withdrawn and evasive, offering only vague answers and insisting that she didn't know how it had happened. "I don't know, Mom," she would say, her voice trembling. "I swear, I don't know." Her distress was palpable, her fear genuine. Sarah and John, despite their confusion and anger, knew that Emily was telling the truth, at least as she understood it. She was as baffled by the situation as they were. The local police were involved, launching an investigation into the suspected abuse. They interviewed Emily, her parents, her friends, and her teachers. They searched for any evidence of wrongdoing, any clue that could lead them to the perpetrator. But the investigation stalled. There were no witnesses, no suspects, and no evidence of foul play. Emily's insistence that she didn't know how she had become pregnant only deepened the mystery. The community of Havenwood, once a haven of peace and tranquility, became a cauldron of gossip and speculation. People whispered behind their hands, casting judgmental glances at Emily and her family. Some offered words of sympathy, but many others were quick to condemn, to assume the worst, to spread rumors and innuendo. Emily became a pariah, an outcast in her own town. She was bullied at school, harassed on the streets, and subjected to cruel taunts and online abuse. She retreated further into herself, her spirit broken, her trust shattered. Sarah and John, fiercely protective of their daughter, tried to shield her from the negativity, but it was impossible to escape the constant scrutiny and judgment. They felt isolated, alone, and increasingly desperate. They sought second opinions, consulting with specialists at larger hospitals in Burlington and even Boston. They subjected Emily to a battery of tests, hoping for a different diagnosis, a more rational explanation. But the results were always the same: Emily was pregnant. The doctors were baffled. The experts were confounded. They had never seen anything like it. The initial shock of the diagnosis gave way to a deeper, more pervasive fear. If Emily truly was pregnant, and she didn't know how it had happened, what did that mean? What unknown force was at work? The misdiagnosis, while seemingly definitive, was creating more questions than answers, and plunging the family into a nightmare of uncertainty and fear. The news of Emily's pregnancy, a scandalous anomaly in the quiet town of Havenwood, spread like wildfire. The initial shock and disbelief quickly morphed into a maelstrom of gossip, judgment, and outright cruelty. The Carters, once a respected and well-liked family, became the subject of whispered conversations, pointed fingers, and open condemnation. The small-town intimacy that had once been a source of comfort now felt like a suffocating cage. At the local grocery store, Sarah would overhear snippets of conversations, hushed whispers about her daughter's condition. She would see the judgmental glances, the pitying stares, the barely concealed disgust. At the library, where she worked, she found herself ostracized by some of her colleagues, her requests for help ignored, her presence met with uncomfortable silence. John, too, faced the brunt of the community's judgment. His carpentry business suffered as customers canceled contracts and avoided his services. He was no longer seen as the friendly, reliable craftsman. He was the father of the pregnant girl, a symbol of shame and disgrace. Emily, however, bore the heaviest burden. She was subjected to relentless bullying at school, her classmates taunting her, calling her names, and spreading vicious rumors. She was excluded from social events, ostracized by her former friends, and treated as a pariah. The online world was even crueler. Anonymous messages, filled with hateful comments and threats, flooded her social media accounts. She was forced to shut down her profiles, to retreat from the virtual world, but the damage had already been done. The constant scrutiny, the relentless judgment, and the pervasive negativity took a heavy toll on the family. They felt isolated, alone, and besieged by a community that had once embraced them. They tried to ignore the gossip, to shield Emily from the cruelty, but it was impossible to escape the constant barrage of negativity. Their home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison, a place of confinement and shame. Some members of the community, however, offered support. Susan, Lisa's best friend, remained steadfast in her loyalty, providing a shoulder to cry on, a listening ear, and practical help. A few of Emily's teachers, recognizing the toll the situation was taking on her, reached out, offering extra help and understanding. They saw beyond the scandal, recognizing Emily's inherent goodness and her potential. And then there was Max, Emily's faithful golden retriever. He remained her constant companion, her unwavering protector, his presence a source of comfort and unconditional love. He seemed to sense Emily's distress, responding with increased affection and a fierce protectiveness. He was a furry, four-legged reminder that she was not alone, that she was loved, and that she was worthy of love. But the support was a small island in a sea of negativity. The overwhelming reaction from the community was one of judgment, condemnation, and ostracism. The Carters were living a nightmare, trapped in a small town that had turned against them, their lives shattered by a mystery they couldn't understand and a judgment they couldn't escape. The community's reaction was a harsh reflection of societal biases and the devastating consequences of unchecked gossip and assumptions. Driven by a desperate need for answers and a refusal to accept the impossible, Sarah and John embarked on a relentless quest for a second, third, and even fourth opinion. They were convinced that there had to be a rational explanation for Emily's condition, a medical reason that defied the initial diagnosis. They traveled to Burlington, Vermont, consulting with specialists at the University of Vermont Medical Center. They underwent a new round of tests, more sophisticated and comprehensive than those performed at the local hospital. They hoped for a breakthrough, a different diagnosis, a glimmer of hope. But the results were the same. The doctors confirmed the initial findings: Emily's hormone levels, her physical changes, and the ultrasound images all pointed to pregnancy. They were sympathetic but firm, reiterating the medical evidence and offering counseling services to help the family cope with the situation. Sarah and John refused to give up. They traveled to Boston, Massachusetts, seeking the expertise of specialists at Massachusetts General Hospital, one of the leading medical centers in the country. They consulted with endocrinologists, geneticists, and obstetricians, specialists in rare and unusual medical conditions. They subjected Emily to another round of extensive testing, hoping for a different outcome, a miracle cure. The specialists in Boston, intrigued by the unusual case, delved deeper, exploring every possible explanation. They considered rare genetic disorders, hormonal imbalances, and even the possibility of a previously unknown medical condition. They examined Emily's medical history, her family history, and her lifestyle, searching for any clue that could shed light on the mystery. They consulted with colleagues around the world, sharing their findings and seeking their input. The process was long, arduous, and emotionally draining. Emily, exhausted and frustrated, endured countless tests, examinations, and interviews. She felt like a medical anomaly, a specimen under a microscope, her body subjected to endless scrutiny. Sarah and John, their hopes dwindling with each inconclusive test, clung to the belief that there had to be an answer. They refused to accept the impossible, to believe that their daughter, a 12-year-old child, was pregnant without any explanation. They spent hours researching medical journals, scouring the internet for information, and contacting experts in various fields. They were driven by a desperate need to understand, to find a solution, to protect their daughter from the nightmare that had engulfed their lives. The further investigation was a testament to their unwavering love and determination. They were willing to go to any lengths to explore every possibility, to find the truth, no matter how elusive it might be. The specialists, while initially confirming the pregnancy, were also starting to see that this case was far from ordinary, pushing them to look beyond the conventional. Throughout the ordeal, Max, Emily's golden retriever, exhibited increasingly strange and protective behavior. He had always been devoted to Emily, but his actions now went beyond mere companionship. They bordered on the obsessive. He became Emily's shadow, following her everywhere, his eyes constantly fixed on her. He would growl at anyone who approached her too quickly, even her own parents, his protective instincts heightened to an almost alarming degree. He would sleep at the foot of Emily's bed, his body pressed against hers, as if guarding her from some unseen threat. He would whine and whimper whenever she left the house, pacing restlessly until she returned. His appetite decreased, and he lost weight, his usually glossy coat becoming dull and matted. He seemed to be mirroring Emily's physical and emotional distress, his own well-being intertwined with hers. Sarah and John, initially puzzled by Max's behavior, attributed it to the stress of the situation. They assumed that he was sensing their anxiety and Emily's distress, and that his protective instincts were simply amplified. But as Max's behavior became more extreme, they began to wonder if there was something more to it. He seemed to be reacting to something specific, something that they couldn't see or understand. One evening, as Emily was sitting on the sofa, reading a book, Max suddenly started barking furiously, staring intently at Emily's abdomen. He nudged her stomach with his nose, whining and whimpering, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of fear and concern. Emily, startled by Max's outburst, tried to calm him down, but he wouldn't be soothed. He continued to bark and whine, his attention focused entirely on her abdomen. Sarah and John, witnessing this bizarre display, exchanged worried glances. They had heard stories of dogs sensing illness in their owners, of animals detecting subtle changes in body chemistry that humans couldn't perceive. Could Max be sensing something that they had missed? Could he be trying to tell them something about Emily's condition? They decided to consult with a veterinarian, Dr. Miller, a woman known for her expertise in animal behavior. They described Max's unusual actions, his protectiveness, his focus on Emily's abdomen, and his overall distress. Dr. Miller listened intently, her brow furrowed in thought. "It's certainly possible," she said. "Dogs have an incredibly sensitive sense of smell. They can detect subtle changes in hormones and body chemistry that we humans can't. It's possible that Max is sensing something related to Emily's condition." Dr. Miller suggested running some tests on Max, checking his hormone levels and his overall health. She also recommended observing his behavior more closely, documenting any unusual patterns or triggers. The tests on Max revealed nothing conclusive, but his behavior continued to provide clues, subtle hints that something was amiss. He was not just reacting to Emily's emotional state, he was reacting to something physical, something tangible, something that was emanating from her body. Max's unusual behavior added another layer of mystery to the unfolding drama. It was a reminder that the connection between humans and animals could be profound and inexplicable, and that sometimes the answers to the most complex questions could be found in the most unexpected places. The loyal dog was not just a companion, he was becoming a key to unlocking the truth. The breakthrough came, not from another test or another specialist, but from a careful review of Emily's existing medical records, combined with Dr. Miller's observations about Max's behavior. Dr. Ramirez, the young, inquisitive resident at Massachusetts General, who had been assisting the senior specialists, noticed a small detail that had been overlooked. In one of Emily's early ultrasounds, there was a faint, almost imperceptible anomaly, a small mass that had been dismissed as an artifact, a shadow, a nothing. Dr. Ramirez, however, couldn't shake the feeling that it was something more. He reviewed the ultrasound images again and again, comparing them to Emily's other scans and to Max's behavioral patterns. He noticed that Max's intense focus on Emily's abdomen corresponded to the location of the anomaly on the ultrasound. He consulted with Dr. Chen, a senior radiologist known for her expertise in interpreting complex medical images. He showed her the ultrasound, pointing out the anomaly and sharing his suspicions. Dr. Chen, initially skeptical, agreed to take a closer look. She examined the images meticulously, using advanced imaging software to enhance the details and to create a three-dimensional reconstruction of Emily's abdomen. As she studied the images, her eyes widened. She saw it now, the subtle but distinct shape, the unusual texture, the unexpected location. It wasn't a fetus. It wasn't a pregnancy. It was something else entirely. "It's a teratoma," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and relief. "A very large, very complex teratoma." A teratoma is a rare type of tumor that contains various tissues, such as hair, teeth, bone, and even, in extremely rare cases, partially formed organs. It's a congenital tumor, meaning it's present at birth, but it can remain undetected for years, growing slowly and silently. In Emily's case, the teratoma had grown in her abdomen, mimicking the symptoms of pregnancy. The hormonal changes caused by the tumor had triggered the nausea, the fatigue, and the missed periods. The swelling in her abdomen was not a growing fetus, but the growing tumor. The unique features that had been misinterpreted as fetal characteristics were, in fact, the various tissues contained within the teratoma. It was a bizarre, almost unbelievable explanation, but it was the only one that made sense. Dr. Ramirez and Dr. Chen presented their findings to the senior specialists, who were initially stunned, then intrigued, and finally convinced. The misdiagnosis had been a result of a combination of factors: the rarity of the condition, the unusual presentation, and the initial assumption of pregnancy based on Emily's age and symptoms. Sarah and John, informed of the true diagnosis, were overwhelmed with relief. Emily wasn't pregnant. She hadn't been abused. She had a rare medical condition, a treatable condition. The relief was mixed with anger and frustration. They had been through hell, subjected to public scrutiny, judgment, and condemnation, all because of a misdiagnosis. But the anger was overshadowed by the overwhelming joy of knowing that Emily was safe, that she wasn't going to be a mother, that she had a chance at a normal life. The true diagnosis was a turning point, a moment of clarity in a sea of confusion and despair. It was a testament to the power of perseverance, the importance of questioning assumptions, and the extraordinary ability of a young resident and a perceptive veterinarian indirectly, through Max, to see what others had missed. The medical mystery was solved, but the emotional scars would take time to heal. The news of the true diagnosis, a complex teratoma mimicking pregnancy, brought a wave of relief, but also a new set of challenges. The teratoma, while not cancerous, was large and potentially life-threatening if left untreated. Surgery was necessary, and it would be a complex and delicate procedure. Dr. Howard, a renowned pediatric surgeon at Massachusetts General, was brought in to lead the surgical team. He explained the procedure to Sarah, John, and Emily, outlining the risks and the potential complications. The teratoma is located close to several major organs, he explained, his voice calm and reassuring. We'll need to be very careful to avoid damaging them. It's a complex surgery, but we have a highly skilled team, and we're confident that we can remove it successfully. Emily, though understandably scared, faced the prospect of surgery with a newfound courage. The months of uncertainty, the fear of the unknown, had been replaced by a sense of hope and determination. She knew that the surgery was necessary, that it was her chance to reclaim her life, to be a normal 12-year-old girl again. The surgery lasted for over 8 hours, a grueling and tense ordeal for Sarah and John, who waited anxiously in the surgical waiting room, their hearts pounding with fear and anticipation. Max, sensing their distress, remained by their side, offering silent comfort and unwavering support. Finally, Dr. Howard emerged from the operating room, his face weary but his eyes filled with a sense of accomplishment. The surgery was successful, he announced. We were able to remove the entire teratoma. Emily is in recovery, and she's doing well. Sarah and John embraced, tears of relief streaming down their faces. Their daughter was safe. The nightmare was over. Emily's recovery was slow but steady. She spent several days in the intensive care unit, her body healing from the trauma of the surgery. She experienced pain, discomfort, and fatigue, but her spirit remained unbroken. Max was allowed to visit her in the hospital, his presence a source of comfort and joy. He would lie quietly beside her bed, his head resting on her hand, his eyes fixed on her face, as if monitoring her every breath. As Emily regained her strength, she began to process the emotional toll of the past few months. She worked with Dr. Carter, her therapist, to understand the trauma she had endured, not from abuse, but from the misdiagnosis, the public scrutiny, and the fear of the unknown. She also had to grapple with the bizarre reality of her condition, the fact that she had carried within her a tumor that had mimicked a pregnancy. It was a difficult concept to grasp, a strange and unsettling truth. But with the support of her family, her friends, and her therapist, she began to heal, both physically and emotionally. She rediscovered her joy in life, her passion for learning, and her love for Max, her faithful companion. The surgery was a success. The recovery was challenging, but Emily emerged stronger, more resilient, and more grateful for the simple things in life. The teratoma was gone, the misdiagnosis corrected, and the path to a normal life was finally clear. With the teratoma successfully removed, the focus shifted to understanding its unusual composition and explaining the unique features that had so convincingly mimicked a developing fetus. This was crucial not only for Emily's and her family's understanding but also for correcting the public misperception and clearing Emily's name. Dr. Chen, the radiologist who had been instrumental in the correct diagnosis, took the lead in explaining the science behind the teratoma. She organized a meeting with Sarah, John, Emily, and Dr. Howard, the surgeon. A teratoma, Dr. Chen began, is a type of germ cell tumor. That means it arises from cells that are normally involved in reproduction. These cells are pluripotent, meaning they have the potential to develop into any type of tissue in the body. She projected images onto a screen, showing the complex structure of the removed teratoma. In most cases, teratomas contain a mixture of tissues, like hair, teeth, bone, and muscle. Emily's teratoma was particularly complex. She pointed to specific areas on the image. Here, you can see areas that resemble bone structure. This is why, on the initial ultrasound, it was mistaken for a fetal skeleton. And here, she indicated another area. We see tissue that is similar to developing neural tissue. This contributed to the hormonal changes that mimic pregnancy. Dr. Howard added, the teratoma was pressing on Emily's internal organs, causing the abdominal swelling. It also produced hormones, which further contributed to the pregnancy-like symptoms. It was a truly remarkable and incredibly rare presentation. Emily, listening intently, found the explanation both fascinating and unsettling. She was learning about a part of her own body that had been a source of mystery and fear, and now it was being explained in scientific terms, demystifying the experience. So, it wasn't a baby? Emily asked, her voice still hesitant. No, honey, Sarah reassured her, squeezing her hand. It was never a baby. It was a tumor, a very unusual tumor, but a tumor nonetheless. Dr. Chen continued, the unique features that were observed were simply different types of tissue that had developed within the teratoma. It's a testament to the incredible potential of our cells, but also a reminder that sometimes things can go wrong in development. The explanation was crucial for Emily's emotional healing. It helped her to understand that she hadn't done anything wrong, that she wasn't responsible for what had happened, and that she wasn't different or abnormal. It was a medical anomaly, a rare occurrence, and she was not to blame. The doctors also emphasized that the teratoma was benign, meaning it was not cancerous. Emily would need regular checkups to ensure that it didn't recur, but her long-term prognosis was excellent. The explanation provided closure, not just for Emily and her family, but also for the medical team. It was a reminder of the importance of thorough investigation, of questioning assumptions, and of looking beyond the obvious. The unique features were demystified, replaced by a scientific understanding that, while complex, was ultimately reassuring. With the true diagnosis revealed, the tide of public opinion in Havenwood began to shift. The whispers of pregnant girl were replaced by murmurs of misdiagnosis and medical miracle. The judgmental stares softened, replaced by expressions of curiosity, sympathy, and, in some cases, shame. The local newspaper, which had previously reported on Emily's pregnancy with thinly veiled sensationalism, published a front-page article detailing the true story, the rare teratoma, the misdiagnosis, the family's ordeal, and Emily's bravery. The article sparked a wave of outrage and apologies. People who had previously condemned Emily and her family now expressed their remorse, their regret for having jumped to conclusions, for having participated in the spread of misinformation and judgment. The school principal, who had initially been hesitant to support Emily, issued a public apology, acknowledging the school's failure to protect her from bullying and harassment. He announced new anti-bullying policies and promised to create a more supportive and inclusive environment for all students. Emily's classmates, some of whom had been among the cruelest bullies, approached her with apologies, expressing their regret for their behavior. Some were genuinely remorseful, while others were simply afraid of being ostracized themselves. The town council organized a community meeting, a forum for open discussion and reconciliation. Sarah and John attended, along with Emily and, of course, Max, who had become a local celebrity, a symbol of loyalty and unwavering support. At the meeting, Sarah spoke eloquently about their experience, about the pain of the misdiagnosis, the trauma of the public scrutiny, and the importance of compassion and understanding. She emphasized the need for education about rare medical conditions and the dangers of unchecked gossip and judgment. Emily, though initially hesitant, also spoke, her voice trembling but firm. She shared her story, her feelings of isolation and fear, and her gratitude for those who had supported her. She spoke about the importance of believing children, of listening to their voices, and of protecting them from harm. The meeting was a turning point. It allowed the community to confront its collective guilt, to acknowledge its mistakes, and to begin the process of healing and reconciliation. Not everyone apologized. Some remained skeptical, clinging to their initial judgments and willing to admit they were wrong. But the overall atmosphere in Havenwood changed. The whispers and stares diminished, replaced by a cautious respect, a tentative acceptance. The Carters, while still bearing the scars of their ordeal, found a measure of peace. They had weathered the storm, they had survived the onslaught of public opinion, and they had emerged stronger and more united than ever. The community's acceptance, while imperfect, was a step towards healing. It was a recognition of their humanity, a validation of their experience, and a promise of a more supportive and understanding future. The apologies, while belated, offered a measure of closure, allowing the family to move forward, to rebuild their lives, and to leave the darkness of the past behind. Through all the trials and tribulations, the unwavering bond between Emily and Max remained a constant source of strength and comfort. Max, who had instinctively sensed Emily's distress from the very beginning, was now her steadfast companion in healing and recovery. With the true diagnosis revealed, Dr. Miller, the veterinarian, offered a scientific explanation for Max's unusual behavior. She explained that the teratoma, while not a fetus, had likely produced hormones similar to those produced during pregnancy. These hormones, undetectable to humans, were easily picked up by Max's sensitive nose. Dogs have an incredible sense of smell, Dr. Miller explained. They can detect subtle changes in body chemistry that we can't even imagine. Max was likely sensing the hormonal fluctuations caused by the teratoma, and his protective instincts kicked in. This explanation provided a rational basis for Max's seemingly inexplicable behavior. It wasn't magic, it wasn't ESP, it was the remarkable sensitivity of a dog's olfactory system, combined with the deep bond he shared with Emily. Emily, who had always felt a special connection with Max, found comfort in this explanation. It reinforced her belief in his unwavering loyalty, his intuitive understanding of her needs, and his profound love for her. As Emily recovered from her surgery and began to heal emotionally, Max remained her constant companion. He would accompany her on walks in the woods, lie beside her as she read, and sleep at the foot of her bed, guarding her dreams. He seemed to understand that she needed him, that his presence provided a sense of security and comfort that no human could offer. He was her free therapist, her silent confidant, her unwavering friend. Emily, in turn, showered Max with affection, grooming him, playing with him, and sharing her deepest thoughts and feelings with him. She knew that he wouldn't judge her, that he wouldn't betray her, and that he would always be there for her, no matter what. Their bond, forged in the crucible of adversity, had grown even stronger. They had faced a nightmare together, and they had emerged victorious, their connection deepened by the shared experience. Emily, as she grew older, often reflected on the role Max had played in her life. She realized that he had been more than just a pet. He had been her savior, her protector, and her most loyal friend. He had sensed her distress when no one else could. He had offered her comfort when she felt most alone, and he had helped her to heal from the trauma she had endured. She often wondered what would have happened if she hadn't had Max by her side. Would she have been able to cope with the misdiagnosis, the public scrutiny, and the emotional turmoil? Would she have found the strength to speak her truth, to fight for justice, to reclaim her life? She knew that she owed him a debt of gratitude that she could never fully repay. He was her hero, her furry guardian angel, and the embodiment of unconditional love. Their bond was a testament to the extraordinary connection between humans and animals, a connection that transcends words, defies logic, and endures through even the darkest of times. And it was a connection that would forever be a source of strength, comfort, and inspiration for Emily.